I live in what I would describe as a pretty standard apartment. The last one I lived in 2 years ago was very similar as well. The building had a few basic hallways and tons of units. I had a parking space in the underground garage, and there were several apartment buildings in the complex. It was like right in the middle of my lease when I had been living there for about 6 months when some weird things happened. My apartment was on the second floor of the building, kind of towards the end of a hallway. One night I was awoken to the sound of banging on my door. This happened to be a Friday night at about 3 o'clock in the morning. Somebody was repeatedly banging on my door, and it seemed about as loud as they could. I just laid there in bed and waited for it to stop. But after it continued for about 10 seconds straight, I decided to get up. However, once I had made it out of my bedroom, the knocking finally stopped. I could hear somebody walking away down the hallway. Then I went to the peephole and I looked out, but the person was gone. I didn't really want to open the door and look out into the hallway, so I didn't. I just went back to bed and didn't hear any more knocks. The next day I was thinking about it, remembering being woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I figured at that point it was probably somebody who was coming home drunk from the bars or something. It made perfect sense because it had been a Friday night, and they probably got back and just started banging on a random door, either just to mess with somebody or because they accidentally went to the wrong place. So I really wasn't that concerned about it. However, at some time the next week it happened again. Once more I woke up to someone pounding on my front door. I had a bad feeling about it, not knowing who this was. I didn't really know any of my neighbors. I wasn't sure if it was one of them or somebody else that was random this time. I did not get up. I just waited for the knocking to end, which took maybe 10 or 20 seconds. Roughly when it finally ended, I stayed up for almost another hour because I really wasn't that tired anymore. I was finally able to get back to sleep a while later, but this was pretty annoying. Several nights went by before it happened again. This time it was a little earlier, though I was still awake and in my living room watching TV. All of a sudden there was a knock at the door. It seemed normal at first, but then it turned into a loud bang. I was so confused. I really didn't want to get up, and I stayed on my couch. The knocking on the door lasted for the usual 15 seconds or so, and then it stopped. This time I once more heard the person walking away, and the rest of the night I didn't hear anything more. Nothing strange happened for a few weeks after that. I had almost forgotten about the whole ordeal, but then randomly it happened again. This time once more I was already awake and in the living room. It was pretty late though, and was after midnight. As I sat on the couch in my living room, I heard this loud pounding on my front door. It was crazy just how hard this person was banging on it. I stayed where I was like usual. This time it seemed to last a little bit longer though, like maybe around 30 seconds. Then I decided to get up and look. I walked over to the door, and it was like the person heard me. When I got within a couple of feet of the door, the knocking stopped and I heard them walking away. I looked through my peephole and saw no one. This time I opened up the door and looked out into the hallway. When I did, I actually saw someone. There appeared to be a man walking away, but I only saw his back. He did not turn around and look at me or anything. The man was walking quickly and I only saw him for maybe 5 seconds. Then he reached the door that led to the stairs and opened it, and then he was gone. I went back inside after that for the entire rest of the time that I lived in my apartment. I never heard any more knocking. I don't know who that guy was. I didn't recognize him. Why he chose to always knock on my door, I also don't know. It really gave me the creeps though. I have lived in my apartment for 3 years. It's a nice place in a great location close to parks, shops and restaurants. However, it was built in the late 90s, so some things feel outdated, and recently my city has grown a lot in population, with many people moving here because of the good weather, strong economy and fun activities like festivals and outdoor events. Because of this, I've noticed the landlord staff working hard to make repairs and updates to the apartments, like fixing plumbing, repainting walls and upgrading appliances to attract more residents. My neighbor lived in his apartment for about 6 years before he bought a house and moved out. When he left, the landlord started renovating his apartment to update it. My bedroom is right next to the wall that faces the staircase in my neighbor's apartment, so I can hear people walking up and down the stairs. The workers were completely renovating my neighbor's apartment. It was one of the first ones they did such big changes to. 4 weeks I saw the workers there painting and fixing the floors. Then one morning when I left for work, I saw them working on the kitchen, installing new cabinets and countertops, but when I came home later they were gone for the day. Nothing unusual happened at all in my apartment, but the strange part came at night. I was awake around 1 a.m. relaxing and watching TV in my room, when suddenly I heard someone slowly walking up the stairs on the other side of the wall. The sound was clear and soft, almost like someone was trying to be quiet. They stopped halfway up the stairs right where my head was, on the other side of the wall. I felt a chill, wondering who it could be. At that hour I could sense someone listening to my breathing, and it made me feel uneasy. I turned off the TV and sat very still. The room felt too silent, and I didn't hear anything for a few minutes. Then, after what felt like a long time, I heard the person start walking up the rest of the stairs to the second floor. Then I remembered that just a few days earlier I had seen the maintenance workers redoing the kitchen in that apartment, but there was no way someone could have moved in that quickly. I got out of bed and went to a room where I could see outside the apartment better. I couldn't see if there was any movement in the apartment from the window, but I had a good view to see if anyone walked out. I sat there for about 15 minutes, straining my eyes and hoping to see something, anything, but nothing happened. So I went back to my room and lay down in bed again. I didn't turn the TV on this time. Instead, I just waited, listening intently for any sound that might break the silence. My heart raced as I tried to calm my thoughts, wondering if I would hear footsteps again. I was scrolling on my phone for about 20 minutes in silence when I heard movement on the stairs again. This time, though, the sound didn't come from the top or the bottom. It started in the middle of the staircase. This meant that the whole time I was sitting there quietly, this person was right on the other side of the wall, listening to everything I was doing. I felt really scared, so I decided to call the police. I gave them all the information about what was happening, and they told me someone would be there very soon. I went back to the other room and looked out the window again. Just a few moments later, a police car pulled up and an officer got out to check the building and the apartment. He was looking around and shining his flashlight in the windows. I heard him knock on the door, and shortly after I could hear him talking to someone, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. The officer then walked over to my door and knocked. I went downstairs and he told me that someone had just moved in there. I laughed and felt completely embarrassed, but more importantly I felt very relieved about the whole situation. I decided to brush it off as just being late, and my mind playing tricks on me. The next day, when I went to leave my apartment, I saw something that made me stop in my tracks. I took only a few steps toward my car when I saw the maintenance workers carrying out the old refrigerator. Curiosity got the best of me, so I walked over to the apartment and looked through the door that was wide open. Inside, the kitchen was still being worked on, with tools scattered everywhere and paint cans lined up against the wall. I walked over to a maintenance man and asked if someone moved in here. He told me the apartment wouldn't be ready for showings for at least 3 weeks. I ran back upstairs to my apartment and called my landlord. I asked her if someone was staying there and she seemed surprised and told me why I was asking this. I then told her about what I experienced the night before. She was shocked and told me they would change the locks on that apartment right away. She also suggested that I call the non-emergency line for the police department and let them know that no one lives there. I did exactly that, and they asked me to come down to the station. I went there and told them all the details of what happened. They were able to find out which officer came to check on my apartment last night so he could help identify the person who answered the door. The officer described the man in detail, and I confirmed that I had never seen him around the apartments before. There was a search around town for a few weeks, but eventually the whole thing just faded away after that night. I never heard anything else from that apartment. About a month later, an older couple moved in. When I saw the moving van pull up, I went outside to introduce myself to them, but to be completely honest, the only reason I went out was to see if any of them matched the description of the person the cop had seen. I had a really hard time sleeping in the weeks after that night. Every little sound made me jump, and I often lay awake staring at the ceiling feeling anxious. I even moved my bed into the smaller second bedroom because it bothered me so much to be near the wall. A few months ago, I got a new apartment. I moved into what I would describe as a pretty average apartment building. There are 4 floors, each floor with a couple of hallways filled with apartment units. I moved in after the lease at my old place was up, and this was certainly a step up from my old apartment. This one had several open units, and I took basically the first one that I saw. It was the second to the last unit at the end of a hallway on the second floor. It had 1 bedroom and a bathroom, and when I moved in I liked it a lot. On one of the first nights that I was living there after I moved in, I was in my living room. I started to hear loud music coming from the next apartment over the one at the very end of the hallway. Normally wouldn't mind, but it was so loud that it was kind of shaking the walls. I couldn't even really hear specifically what songs were playing or anything. It was just like super loud music. I thought maybe even my neighbor was practicing guitar or something. I didn't think it would last for very long, but it did. It continued for hours until well past midnight. I was trying to go to sleep, and my bedroom wall was right against their apartment. With all of the noise, I just couldn't fall asleep. I really didn't want to do it, but I decided to go over and knock on their door. Surely they had to be reasonable and understand that they were making a huge ruckus. So I left my apartment and walked over to it. I knocked on the door loud enough for the person to hear, but they didn't answer. I stayed there for a few minutes and then knocked again. Once more, nobody answered. I was there for at least 5 minutes and realized that they were not going to talk to me. By now I was pretty angry at whoever it was that lived here. I went in my apartment, wrote them a note, and then left it on the door. I told them that their music was too loud and I couldn't sleep, and they shouldn't do that so late at night. The music kept going, and eventually, after putting in headphones and laying in bed for probably another hour, I finally fell asleep. After work the next day, I got home to my place and was having a normal evening. I had almost forgotten about the whole situation the previous night, but at probably like 8 o'clock or 900 p.m. there was a sudden and extremely loud bang at my front door that was followed by several more slightly quieter ones. It was like somebody knocked on my apartment door as loud as they could. When I went to my door, I looked out of the people to see nobody there. I did, however, hear a door closing not far away. I opened up my door to find a note on it. It was the same note that I wrote to my neighbor next door, but on the blank side of it that I hadn't wrote anything on, there were large letters that said "F you." This made me really angry. I wanted to go over and fight whoever this person was, but I decided not to. I took a minute or two to cool down, and I realized that I didn't want to get involved in a war with my new next-door neighbor. After all, I had just moved and I decided to try to take the kinder approach. First, I wrote another note apologizing for being angry about the noise. I said a few other nice things as well, and I wanted to see what would happen as a result. Probably nothing. Or maybe this would get stuffed back in my door. If that was the case and the loud music continued, then I would have to think of something else. After I wrote the note, I taped it to my neighbor's door. For the rest of the night everything was fine. I didn't hear any loud music or anything, no bangs on my door either. The next morning, as I was leaving for work, I opened my front door to find a note on it. I picked it up and read it. It said, "I'm sorry for the confusion. Please come over tonight at 9 p.m. I felt like maybe we were not on bad terms anymore. Maybe they wanted to have a conversation with me and we could talk things out. I still had no idea who lived there or what they looked like or anything. So that night at 9 p.m. I left my apartment and went next door. When I got to the apartment on the end just feet away, I saw that the door was already cracked open a little. I knocked on it. As I opened it up a little farther inside the apartment, it was pitch black, though not a single light was on. I didn't really know what to make of this. Then I heard a man's voice coming from far away deep inside the unit. He called out, telling me to come on inside. I pushed the door open a little bit more. I couldn't really see anything, though I also noticed that there was creepy music playing in the background of the apartment. It sounded like music that would be in the background of a horror movie or something. I didn't want to go any further. I left the apartment and walked back to mine. Whoever that guy was seemed to be really strange. Maybe that was his idea of a joke or something, but there was no way that I was going in there. I contacted the management of my apartment complex. I explained the whole situation and I ended up switching apartments and moving to an open unit on the 4th floor. Literally the next day it was also on the complete other side of the building. I moved all of my stuff and I'm not really sure how they handled the situation with the guy, but I still currently live in the building. I've never gone near where that guy's unit was since, and I honestly have no clue if he still lives there or not. I'm glad that I was able to move out though. For